All right, guys, today's lesson is just to answer any questions that you may have. I do have a few that came in from the regular geometry class that does go with some of our Knowre assignments. And I do feel that it may have come across that you have also found issues with some of the I don't know, answers, um, some of the way you input the answers. So I do want to take at least a couple seconds to go over that. So for right now, as you kind of think about if you have any questions for me from your ENC pages, and I will try to go back and forth and check my email just to make sure while we're going through the lesson today, nothing pops up there. But a couple questions came up concerning the issue with possibly number 10. And I went through and I checked, and I know that the problems change depending upon how many times you try the question, or because they are random. And I know problems you have aren't necessarily identical to the problems that I have. So I went through and I did each of the questions myself, and I worked them out. So number 10, I had a question as to how to input number 10. Pay attention in questions like number 10 that they are going to give you tick marks so that you are able to, with possibly other angles that we know, able to figure out how to match the triangles with their corresponding pieces. So for instance, if I was to name this first one ABC, I notice that I have my tick mark here already given, and that I end with the vertical angle. So when I name the next triangle, I'm going to have to start with E and go EDC so that I end also with the vertical angle. So one of the questions was complete the similarity statement. So when I logged in and I checked, we needed to make sure that we completed the similarity statement according to the letters they started with. And then it said find the value of X. So when I did this one, you can see, and this is work from another problem up here because I tried it a couple times, the other question. You can see that I have to name my similarity statement. And again, my problem that I tried was a little different. But I have my similarity statement, and then I do have my proportion matching up. AC was first and last. So when I match up its corresponding piece, EC is first and last. So I went 8 to 6, 10 to X plus 1.5. I cross multiplied and solved. So these two are the answers that would have gone in for number 10. Now, I'm not sure if anybody had any questions on a problem like number 10 from 8-4, but I am certain that some of us would probably have questions about number 14 from 8-5. And in 8-5, as I move this up, it gives us this right triangle. And we don't really think about this because, again, the problem's talking about our angle bisector. So we're looking to go 12 to 6 and then this piece to X. And the problem is we don't know what this piece is, and we don't have the full length to do subtraction to find this piece, because that's what we talked about a lot last week. So what we need to make sure we're paying attention to is that we have a right triangle. So for this question, I went through and I did a lot of work on how to work this out. So I'm going to bring up my camera a minute. And I have the Pythagorean theorem. So I wanted to check, are they going to have you use decimals or real exact values? And they use exact values. So I worked all this out and I have our radical. So when I take the square root of both sides, we found that the square root of 180 is 6 radical 5. So again, I had to do the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse. This hypotenuse has to be 6 radical 5. They would not accept the decimal answer. So I do use 6 radical 5 minus x to figure out what this length is. And then I set that up in my proportion here. So here is where we now have our angle bisector theorem. So 6 to 12, bottom to top, and then x to 6x, or excuse me, 6 radical 5 minus x. So I have my proportion set up here. When I cross multiply, 6 times 6 radical 5 is just going to be 36 radical 5. 6 times negative x is negative 6x. And then 12x on the other side. I added my 6x, I divided by 18, and I end up with 36 over 18 is 2 radical 5. This was the answer that was accepted in Knowre. And I'm hoping when you go in here and you plug things in, again, don't forget, and I'm just going to see if it'll let me reload that real quick. When I plug stuff in, make sure you look that I can use, I don't want you, go away. Huh. Well, that one's not a good one to look at. Let's try this again. Let's see if they'll give me a different problem because you can't see there we go. So when I plug this in, what I'm looking at here is I have a fraction if need be, and I know in some cases my answer came out to be a fraction. I tried number 14 again and a different problem came up, and the answer ended up being 3, and then I'm able to plug in the radical right next to it, 10, and then underneath it I was able to put the 4. Now that's not what this answer is, but I wanted to show you that I could do the fraction and still input the radical if need be. So these are problems that we've done before. These are problems that we're capable of doing with our radicals, but I wanted to make sure that you did take note that I do have the fraction and the radical that I could access if necessary. So that was number 14 that I wanted to make sure that you understood. Now here's that problem. Again, it's a horrible drawing because I was just hurrying up and doing some of the work. Did the Pythagorean theorem again, found that this whole distance was 3 radical 10, which meant if I had d, I was able to take 3 radical 10 and subtract d, set up my proportion again, cross multiply and solve. And just to make sure, I reloaded and I did another problem, and it came out to be radical 202. And I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be correct, but I worked everything out, and I ended up with 11 radical 202 divided by 20, and it worked. So please make sure, I'm going to shut them up real quick. Please make sure that's what you're looking to input. Let's go. Nope. Let's go. 3-legged beast. Let's go. All right. Any questions so far? I thought that was a very important thing to talk about because of the fractions and the radicals. There was one other question that was asked, and it looked like this. and it was number 16 from 8-3. And again, there are a lot of number 16s from 8-3, and I wanted to make sure that I answered the question they had asked, but I also went in and did my own work to see what that would look like. So yeah, you can see real quick that I did a lot of work on number 16. In fact, here's the number 16 they asked up here at the top. And then here's another number 16 that I did at the bottom. So when this number 16 was asked, and I'll zoom in a little bit for you guys, the main thing that we want to concentrate on is our similarity statement. If I don't pay attention to the similarity statement, I might not match up what I'm supposed to match up. And in this case, I have this rectangle, and then I have the little rectangle in here, which means I've got to figure out what just ML is. So for what we're going to do, I'm going to redo this one. And when I look at separating these two, I want to pay attention to, they did a nice job of giving us this guy as X and the full length here as 15. But they only give us this part as X plus 3. Well, if this was like 8 or maybe 10, if I knew the whole thing was 15, I'd take 15 minus 10 or 15 minus 8, and I'd know what this piece is. So that means what I'm left with over here is really 15 minus that X plus 3. And the same thing on this side, if they told me just from here to here was 2 and over here was X, I would be able to conclude that the entire length from top to bottom was 2 plus X, because I would add them together. So now that I've been able to figure out what the pieces and parts are, I can split this up so that I actually have my two visible figures next to each other. So I do have my larger rectangle, S, R, A, M, and I now know that this side is 2 plus X and this side is 15. And its similar shape in the same order is now X. And if this guy is 15 minus the set of parentheses, minus X minus 3, I now know that this is 12 minus X. So by using what's here, I now have my proportions set up. So we are going to set up our proportion, matching up our corresponding sides. Our 2 plus X and our X correspond. Our 15 and our 12 minus X correspond. So I'm going to set up my proportion. 2 plus X to X should equal 15 to 12 minus X. And then when we cross multiply, I am going to show, oops, that's a plus, that we're going to have to use our FOIL method, which does mean I'm going to end up having to have a quadratic. So when I distribute, I take the 2 times 12 and the 2 times negative X, and then X times 12 and X times negative X. So we end up with 24 minus 2X plus 12X minus X squared equals 5X. When I combine like terms, we have 24 plus 10x minus x squared equals 15x. And because we want in a quadratic our x term, our x squared, to be positive, I'm going to move everything to that side. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides. I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides, and I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. And that way I end up with still this 0 equals, and then my x squared is now positive, which is how we truly want to deal with quadratics. Our 15x minus our 10x should be a positive 5x, and then we have our minus 24. Now, whether the zero's on this side or on this side, our symmetric property tells us that we can solve it either way, but I do know that I can factor this to solve. X plus 8 and x minus 3. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. 8x minus 3x gives us the positive 5x in the middle. So when we take each of our factors, this is called the zero product property. Notice the multiplication means product. When we set each equal to 0, we end up with x equals negative 8 and x equals 3. Now I do have to check your answers. And the nice part is right away, you can't have a negative length. So right away, negative 8 isn't going to work. So when this question was asked, it was asked for us to find MS. And we know that this one's the only one that's going to work. That one cannot. So in this question, MS was 2 plus x, which is 2 plus 3. So MS would be 5. But again, it's paying attention to what the question's asking. I did a number 16 that definitely had a different outcome. And I had to make sure that I definitely paid attention to this statement, because what was, and I even wrote it out just to double check. I didn't want to cheat and go through the steps. But what ends up happening is the triangles are turned around. They don't correspond side by side. So without this similarity statement, without knowing how my proportions are supposed to be set up, I may have set up my ratios wrong. So you can see here I'm doing that 32 minus the quantity, just like I did our 15 minus the quantity here. And I ended up with a fraction. And again, you have to make sure when you are in your Knowre account, let's see if that's still there. When I do a mixed number, I can do 13 and then access that and do the 11 over 16 to get that as a mixed number. I don't have to try to put it in as a decimal or with that ABC. Remember though, with our calculator, you do have your ABC button that can do all the fractions with you. And like we talked about on Friday, I can use that second button and access our mixed number or our improper fraction by changing it back and forth using the second key with those guys on top. So make sure you're careful when you're entering all of these into your Knowre account. Those were the main questions that I thought were really, really good questions that the regular class had asked. I don't know if these are questions that you guys had for me, but I wanted to make sure that I did address them, and if anything, give you guys a heads up on what you should be looking at. Do you have any questions on any of the Knowre problems? On any of the E and C problems? I want to make sure that if you do, I can go over them with you. If not, that's all I had for today. I do want to allude to the fact that if you would prefer, I can absolutely go Zoom on Wednesday if that would help. That way, if you want to ask any live questions, we can do so. That is entirely your call. I would just love to know some feedback from you. So if you have questions or preferences, please. Okay, number 5 on 348. Thank you, Reagan. So let me click over to that very quickly. And let's see if I can. And I think Zoom, Sarah, if, let's see here, window capture. I do think, Sarah, Zoom might help us. There we go. With at least our live feed stuff. That way, if you guys have questions, maybe this time, we'll ask. And then that'll help. 348. Okay, getting closer. And let's just see again. So number 5. And okay, that's a good one to ask because of course it's a proof. We did one like this in our notes last week. So let me copy down page 348, number 5. And we do have the 2 triangles drawn. Honestly, looking at how this is, you don't even need them, to be honest, because what I'm going to rely on, regardless, is still going to be the given statement. That is our similarity statement. So I want to prove that NO times, wrong problem, NO times RT is equal to RS times NP. And our given statement says NOP is similar to RST, and that's given. Okay. So let's go back to our hover cam, and that's what we were asked about in number 5 on page 348. You're going to find that this question is actually really fast. So let's talk about what we know. We know that in similar triangles, there are 2 requirements. All corresponding angles are congruent, and all corresponding sides are in proportion. So if figures are truly similar, those 2 requirements happen all the time. So right now, they've done the hard part for us. They went through all the steps to get us to triangles are similar. Doesn't matter at this point whether it was side, 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 angle, angle, or side, angle, side. They are telling us they already know they're similar. So what that does mean is that I have a proportion that already happened. I know it already happened because this cross multiplication is what I want to prove. So in my second step, I want to say that I had sides in proportion. And I can already say if triangles are similar, then corresponding sides are in proportion. So I know this is kind of like that, again, CPCTC for similar triangles. I know that that's what's supposed to happen. So now all I have to do is figure out, how do I fill in my proportion? So notice I have my ratio, top bottom, equal ratio, top bottom. If this is how the cross multiplication worked, notice how this is NOP and this guy right here starts off with NO. I'm just going to go ahead and organize that as NO would go on top. Again, I'm just using the way this triangle was written. That guy was first, so let's just put him as the first proportional. And it's telling me in my proof statement that it's supposed to cross multiply with RT. So RT would have to go in the bottom. Notice they don't correspond because they're not top to bottom. They're not side to side. They're cross multiplication, so it shouldn't be that NO and RT are in the same spots in my similarity statement. So then it does talk about RS and NP over here. Well, notice how NO and RS are in the same spot. So it kind of makes sense that the cross multiplication would hold up. NO and RS, they correspond here. They're not going to cross multiply. So we did have this pattern of left to right, left to right, left to right, or big to small over big to small. So we still held that pattern. But notice how I did the proof. So far, it's only going to be 3 steps. But what I tried to do was make sure that I used not only my proof to help, but I knew what the result was. Because the triangles were similar, I was able to fill this in. I started with blank proportions so that I could fill that in using my similarity statement to do my proportionality statement, but also knowing what everything should do because of this cross multiplication. And as I'm going to write the last line, can anybody tell me what the reason will be? Because we don't say cross multiplication. Please type in what that reason will be. Yep, means extremes product theorem. Perfect, because we are going to take our means and our extremes. The extremes are the first two, the means are the middle two, and product means multiplication. So we do have our means extremes product theorem. Perfect. And that's it. So it was a good question to ask because even though there's only 3 lines, it was a matter of using our context clues to put things back together. Well done. Other questions that you would like to go over before we finish up for the day? And again, you can make a collection of questions. You can email them to me. It's entirely your choice. I would, again, stay on track, try to get as much finished at your leisure so that you can send things in. And again, if you finish your ENC pages early, you can always send those in to me early and then I will have them graded. Keeping in mind that I am grading all of yours on a computer screen So please, when you're done, you can absolutely send them to me as you finish. You don't have to wait till the 13th. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, please remember to email me. Let me know what you have, and then we will look to Zoom on Wednesday. If for some reason the Zoom goes down, we will make sure that I will pick right up with live stream so that we don't lose anything for the day. And then you guys can decide on Wednesday if you want to meet back on Friday. Again, Fridays if we have um, any issues. Oh, what is this? When is the latest you want the ENC pages? Are we doing? Okay. So those ENC pages, I already have it in Google Classroom, Megan. Everything is spelled out, including the list of questions that you are to complete. There's definitely not all of them. Again, I spell it out pretty clearly in Google Classroom. The latest the due date is April 13th. But there is a list of problems that I have placed into Google Classroom right now. I think there was 12 questions. I don't know why the number 12 sticks in my head. I would have to go back and look. However, of the questions, I've already done 3 of them for you. 2 of them were loaded to Google Classroom, I believe, last week. And I will then load everything that I've done today between the ENC questions and the Knowre questions. I will scan and upload all of them for you and put them into Google Classroom. So if we're going day by day, which now is just Monday, Wednesday, and maybe Fridays if we need it, you should be able to go right into Classroom and find all of that. So hopefully that will help. Again, I've done 3 of the questions already assigned, so that kind of cuts back on the amount of work you need to do on your own. So hopefully that answered your question. All right, guys, if there's nothing else, we will talk to you again on Wednesday. Thank you so much.